My mother was my kindergarten teacher for one day because she expelled me from kindergarten because school didn't suit me. And I failed school. Here I am, a teacher. I have a PhD. I've done all this stuff for somebody. The system didn't suit me because I'm wacky and I'm an artist and I'm super creative, and sitting still is a huge challenge for me, even at 50.
So welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Unleashed Learning Radio for our podcast listeners. Now, if your team is committed to making learning stick for everyone, inclusion is a key. And to support the ways you're embedding that work throughout your team, we've got Dr. Ruby Scarlett here. Now, she's an activist, early childhood educator, researcher, consultant, and academic, and she holds numerous degrees in early childhood education and the performing arts. And her book, The Anti-Bias Approach to Early Childhood Education, is not just for early childhood educators, but for leaders and educators in all sectors. Here we go. Dr. Red, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV.
Hi, how are you, Dr. DeJean?
So, Red, as I call you, as you know, what we do at Unleashed Learning is we embed a system into schools, businesses, and organizations to make learning stick for everyone. And the everyone's the equity piece, right? And because your the fourth edition came out, I thought it's a really great opportunity to be thinking about equity, inclusion, and anti-bias education with your leadership and the work you do. So with that said, the question I want to start the conversation with is, can you help us define, now I know you're in early childhood education, but I just need to say early childhood educators know teaching and learning like you folks are on literally. Like, so it's really, really true. The complexity of what you talk about, no. So while I'm guessing there'll be early childhood leaders who are listening to this, I believe this episode is going to really inform and influence the greater population of educators and leaders out there. So I just need to frame that. Okay. So how are you defining what an anti-bias approach in education is?
Okay. I'm going to do a really quick history lesson to contextualize my response to that. So Louise Derman Sparks and the Anti-Bias Task Force, which is a wonderful group of people from Pacific Oaks in the US, they were activists, right? And a diverse bunch of people. And they looked at they were active in the civil rights movement and the feminist movements. And I guess there was that question of, why do we have to wait till we're adults to be activist and win rights that we kind of should already have? What would happen if we created a curriculum that started from day dot, honouring children's rights, but everybody's rights? And so there was the birth of the first anti-bias curriculum in 1989. Two women from Australia went, this is amazing, we need an Australian version. So it did need to be contextualised from place to place. That's a really key point. And so that was Barb Creaser and Elizabeth Dow. And they then published the first edition of that book in 1995. Now, to put in a nutshell what anti-bias is, it essentially means doing everything to tackle and fight bias. The problem with thinking about anti-bias or anti-discrimination and then thinking about education, people think it's kind of just a social issue, but it's not. If you don't feel included, represented, feel good about yourself, reaffirmed, reassured, you're not going to learn to your best.
I mean, there's many ways to talk about it just from the science of the effective filter. So if your guard is up, but also schema, if you are looking and saying, this is not connect, either literally you're thinking that, or you're like, there's a disconnect. This doesn't connect to me. I don't see myself in here. Then you can't get it to stick. So just if the mission of this to make it to stick, what you're talking about is so important.
You're not going to learn. The other beautiful piece is that I think anti-bias and people, teachers in general, not just early child, but everybody, I think when we talk about diversity and difference, people approach this with a lot of love and enthusiasm and goodwill. But I think they think anti-bias was designed to apply to the gay child or the black child or the child with a disability. And what Louise Derman Sparks says so beautifully in the front of her 1989 book, I'm sorry, there's a terrible storm going on here. Okay. is that she says to grow up thinking that you are privileged, white middle class man, all the norms, whatever they are, because no one can ever find them. To grow up thinking that you are superior because you are those things is just as damaging to grow up thinking that you are less because you are not white, you are multilingual, your skin is a different color, you're different sexuality, different gender, different geographical region, and so on and so on. So I think that message about anti-bias is for everybody is critical. And so if we want children to be successful learners, and as you say, to make it stick, then we have to go, is everybody included and represented? And what am I doing to recognise my participation in that? Neurodiversity is a great concept to use as an example, because people go, oh, the person with autism is neurodiverse. They're not. Neurodiversity means all of us.
That's right. It's all.
And therefore there are differences in our neurodiversities rather than that's a neurodiverse person.
It actually brings me to the next question so perfectly, if I can go there, because one of the things I'm hearing you say, Red, is that, and pardon me if you're not actually saying it this way, but this is how I'm hearing this, okay, is that we often think it's this thing we're doing for other people in some ways. Like, let me just fix this or do this. And from our conversations before and also the book, and what we do at Unleashed Learning, is it's also an internal investigation. So what I'm curious about for the next question is, in a lot of the work we do at Unleashed Learning, starting the journey is there's an internal journey, leading from the inside out, teaching from the inside out. So I want to know, what do we have to know about ourselves as leaders or educators in order to have this approach?
I think the first thing is to recognize a couple of things. One is a willingness to be able to critically examine yourself. Another thing is to recognize that, like, I can talk about white privilege. I've got an Italian background and an Irish background, but I look like this and I speak like this and I'm educated. So I automatically have all this privilege assigned to me. And that doesn't make me a bad person because I have this privilege, but I do have to acknowledge what that privilege is and then what that privilege does when I'm in relationship with other people. So being able to critically unpack yourselves and go, okay, this bit, I'm a woman, so I know how discrimination feels. And so I can experience the other side of that, but then I'm a white educated woman. So once you kind of add all the bits together, it starts to give you a bit of a perspective on how you are invited to participate in the world because of what you've got. But then I go, well, I've got all this privilege. Am I just going to walk around with it? Or do I do things like this with you and get to talk about how I reflect on my privilege? So use my privilege to be a mouthpiece for anti-discrimination education. And look, it's not sexy. It's not a sexy leg. It's not like environments and pedagogy and all that, those really yummy, beautiful things, unfortunately, although it's getting its garter on. But I think that to do that work and to recognize it's not going to make you a bad person. So there's kind of that psychological piece that I think the willingness needs to have. And then you need to do the unpacking and do it with other people.
With other people. I think that's the real key to that as well, right? I also makes me think when you're saying that is, it's the hard, uncomfortable work, right? Like, think about hidden curriculums, about what's really going on here and who's benefiting from this. But I think it's actually fun work too, because it becomes layers about layers about layers. So I think you answered that really well, which I didn't doubt, but it really explained that of how you show up in the world from the information, and then how you use that and how you negotiate. So let me ask the next question. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I think inevitably it is hard, uncomfortable work, but think about the conversations that you and I had about discrimination around gender and sexuality. When you do that, you have that conversation with someone about a hard thing, then you kind of get this beautiful feel good. It's like it's actually a tender connector when you unleash a little bit of yourself, to use your beautiful language. You then open up for this other connection that you might not have otherwise know that you would be experiencing. So I think it's a little bit beautiful as well.
I do too. And we get to find out about ourselves and each other and what this work might really be about and for who. So let me ask this question if I can. I'm looking through here. What kinds of, now we talk a lot about the lenses to be looking through and about negotiating identities and what that feels like. So if we're doing anti-bias education, what are some of the way I use as an analogy, I use glasses, what helps me see. What are the lenses we need to be by gender and language and families and sexual orientation, economic, what are the lenses we're looking through to do this kind of work?
Well, that's kind of a fun one because people have a lot of options. So first of all, that metacognitive work of recognizing that we are always looking through some kind of lens. Sometimes it feels invisible because it might be a normative one, although I challenge anybody who's listening and watching that you haven't had a day where you don't feel good about yourself. That means you're immediately measuring yourself up against something. That's a lens. I think originally, Louise Sparks and the task force used critical theory because it asked questions about the fairness of systems and structures, and then what happened when people went through those systems and structures, whether fairness or unfairness actually produced these wonderful, educated human beings. So critical theory is important for that piece to help you look that way. Since then, and people like myself use post-human theory and post-structuralist theory and feminist theory and queer theory and critical race theory. So you can kind of expand it out, but that probably sounds overwhelming for some people. But I think it's an opportunity to say, recognize the lens that you're looking through because it could be invisible, and then go, what would happen if I look at it from another point of view, even if I disagree with it or even if I'm uncomfortable with it? Then look at another point of view, even if I disagree with it and even if I'm uncomfortable with it. It's not that we're trying to change your brain to, you have to know this and you have to know this. But when you do look at things from another perspective, immediately it opens up and go, hey, actually that person is experiencing this really differently from me. I'm experiencing it with this privilege or this discrimination. They're experiencing it with this privilege or this discrimination. There's got to be a better way. And then once we do that, then we can start talking about learning and cognitive processes and participation in classrooms and curriculum and
Makes me think we do that in community, right? We did an Unleashed Learning TV episode with Dora Dome about critical race theory because there's this whole crazy stuff going on with it, to explain what theory is and how it gives us lenses to see, and then we can see the structure and do stuff from those structures. So let me ask this question because I'm sure it's on people's mind, okay? And Unleashed Learning, what we say is never perfection, but just positive progress, right? And one of the things I love about early child educators is you talk about embedded approach, but you're also talking about critical reflection, like creating, I'm using the word, but feedback loops, critical reflection. So how do we're going to mess up. I mess up sometimes I say things, I'm like, I'll drive home, go, what did I just say? Where did that come from? And I'll call and go, you know what I said? So how do we mess up to get better rather than mess up to go, oh gosh, they're going to attack me, or I feel bad about myself, because we are going to mess up. So what's the process? What do we do? Because we're not going to do this perfectly. So how do we do this getting better along the way?
So there's a couple of things. Again, self-awareness is, and they're kind of words we use a lot, but I think if we talk about embedding something, it's out there. What I'm suggesting to people is if you embody something, it's in here and then you're expressing it. So how am I embodying what Aboriginal people are telling me about racism? So, for example, I'm working with two wonderful women at the moment working on a gender equity project, and one of the women is Aboriginal, and out of my mouth just comes, oh, well, it's not just black and white. Now, that's a little idiom that we use in the English language. Yeah. And her and I both laughed. But when you say black and white, when you are with a person who identifies as black, and there's a power differential between black people and white people, then there's a little, racial innuendo there that you get to recognize and go, look what is embodied in me. And it's not bad that it's there, but it's there. And it's there because that's the language with which I've learned and the idioms that are part of that language. So therefore, I get an opportunity to go, hey, I need to think about what happens when I say that. And I guess the other part of that is we have to make sure that we're not beating ourselves up, because if we suddenly become a martyr, oh, I did the wrong thing and I said that and I shouldn't have said black and white and blah, blah, all we're doing is putting ourselves in a bubble where we can't receive and reciprocate. And I think that most people, most generalizing here, would go, I'm really glad that you just acknowledged that. And suddenly you have that little, the tender connect that I was talking about before. So in a way, the messing up can sometimes be the thing that shows your awareness, to demonstrate the expression of what's embodied and give you that special tender moment. And in that tender moment, the dopamine goes, the endorphins go off, and you're learning. It's like this incredible thing. It's like releasing a pressure point. So I think the way we've talked about anti-discrimination stuff has been, it's hard and it's la, 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 la. I think we've got to talk about the release of stuff and that, the tenderness, what if you have a cry? How beautiful. What if you have a laugh to get through it and go, oh my gosh, I can't believe I said that I'm Australia's answer to Bridget Jones.
Yeah.
I think we've got new and other ways of embodying and expressing what we've got embodied, that's whether it's sedimented stuff or new stuff. And I think that that's a way to give ourselves permission to mess up, as you say, and then go, that example is a piece of positive progress.
It makes me think that, so we talk about unleashed learning so a delivery model is filling in, right? But an unleashing is bringing it out of. So it's really this way is how it happens. And I think that sometimes what happens, the way you're describing that, is it's coming out of us and we listen and go, oh, wait. And so it sticks through us. So you make that comment, black or white, you critically reflect. It sticks because and it's like you are a self-reflective practitioner who everything is teaching you and me and all of us how to embody. And I love the word embody rather than to do, right? To do. And that's hard. That can be hard work, because then we have to really understand who we are in this. And I would also say then our friends, families, colleagues, they become our teachers.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And I mean, you think about when you receive discrimination and that goes into you and you find that hard to forget. Every human has that experience. Why would we want that for each other? Why would we not be resisting that? And as you say, expressing that so that there's a new way to respond to that, and rather than carrying it all, because that's the stuff that gets us down, and that's the stuff that stops us from learning and stops us from collaborating really well and stops us trusting and stops us participating.
That's so eloquently. Okay, so I want to ask a question about one of the things you folks do is embedded practice, right? And the great thing about that is when I talk to early childhood, because they often will say, well, is it the right thing embedded? Do we know what it is? La, 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 la. So how do we get an embedded approach to anti-bias education? How do we do that from a systems way? So it's not like it's just me out there or whatever that means. How do we embed this work throughout our teams and organizations?
I think there's two answers to that. One is it's a bit tricksy, and the other one is it's super easy. So I think when people talk about education, once again, they don't realize that everything is political. Yes. So even though education might seem like it's not political because you're sitting down and you're doing maths, or you're making a volcano to explode with vinegar and bicarb soda, I've no idea why I use that example. I've never done that. It's embodied. Yeah. I think that recognizing that everything is framed up in a particular way, if it's framed up as apolitical, we think, anti-bias is a dot point that we add to the list of things that we do. Instead of seeing that there is no learning if you don't feel good about yourself. There is no learning if you don't know how to be reciprocal in and with difference. And Donna Haraway puts it beautifully where she talks about flourishing in and with diversities and differences, not including them so that you're taking that here and putting it there, but the flourishment, which I love as a verb. And then, so I think it's that kind of stuff to go, your systems and structures are political and they've been created to do this. And all systems and structures need constant review, and we've got to be in positive progress, to use your beautiful language, because it's not going to suit that person and that person and that person. And I can tell you, my mother was my kindergarten teacher for one day because she expelled me from kindergarten because school didn't suit me. And I failed school. Here I am, a teacher. I have a PhD. I've done all this stuff for somebody. The system didn't suit me because I'm wacky and I'm an artist and I'm super creative, and sitting still is a huge challenge for me. Even at 50, I'm sitting here like this, William.
I'm standing a little bit like this.
Yeah.
I get it. I get it.
It's kind of gentle.
Yeah.
So those things are a reminder. That's where if we're doing it out there, we're going, oh, it should be like this and should be like this. But do we actually believe that? Because what's our embodied experience? And inevitably, even if you liked school and were good at it, there is still going to be a space for, I struggled with this. I couldn't get my lunch eaten in that time. I couldn't do my work in the classroom when there's a lot of people around me, but I could do it at home by myself. All of those elements and aspects, I think, are part of what systems and structures are produced to create. So therefore, anti-bias education is about making sure that every single person participates on their terms, not on our terms. We don't want to fix children to fit. We want to squiggle the systems so that they wrap around us and cuddle us to be wonderful and successful and feel fabulous and, you know, enjoy education and get the best out of it. The other thing I think to add to that is, and Patty Lather, who's a feminist methodologist from the US, talks about, you know, it's a beautiful question, what counts as valid knowledge and who decides? So I don't do maths very well at all. I'm really good at music. So actually I can do maths. Yes. So it's kind of like, you get me?
Yeah, so I get you.
Subject matter and separating those things out. Of course, we need to pull them apart to learn them and study them, but looking creatively across to play the piano is a mathematical experience as much as it is a musical experience. So I think being a little bit more open to systems and structures, being able to squiggle them so that everybody can thrive, not just survive, but thrive. And then having this experience of going, aren't we in a powerful position as teachers to create these worlds for children? Goodness knows who they will become.
I don't know if this is the quote, but it makes me think what you say. I think it's Bell Hooks said that education is never politically neutral, either questions or confirms the culture. So I always remember that, right? Because if we're not questioning it, it's still political, because that's a stance as well. So, well, Red, I just want to say, I think that we talk about making learning stick for everyone, and so much of that process is who the educator is. It's about understanding who the students are, how reclusive spaces. I think this conversation really helps us start diving in or swimming in it a little bit more. And I've been really excited to talk to you. So thank you so much for the work you do for this world.
Oh, thank you so much, William. And I feel very grateful to be able to be here speaking to you about it.
Fantastic. Well, we'll let people know, and we will talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So we now want to hear from you. And our question is this: what is one way you embed an anti-bias approach to your teaching or your leadership work? Now, some of the best conversations take place after the episode, so jump over there, and while you're there, grab one of our 2 free ebooks, and together we can make learning stick for everyone.